Rise Against is a punk rock band from Chicago. We all grew up in the punk and hardcore scenes, and our music is sort of a derivative of that, I guess. You know, just some of our influences. We grew up on a lot of old punk stuff like Black Flag and Dead Kennedys and Minor Threat and Jawbreaker and The Descendants, and certainly got into all kinds of bands growing up. And I think what we do is sort of an extension of all of that, you know, interpreted in our own way.
What made you first want to become a musician? Did you grow up with a musical background there?
You know, I didn't have that musical of a background, you know. I kind of did the gratuitous piano lessons when I was a kid, and that was about it. You know, I always loved music, but I never really played an instrument. I didn't even start playing guitar until I was about 13 or 14, not until really I was in high school. And but as soon as I picked it up, you know, I immediately started writing songs. You know, and I'll put songs in quotes because I was 15 and I thought they were songs. But you know, I started immediately growing very attached to the instrument and putting sounds together. I wasn't one of these kids who learned other people's songs. I was just always kind of like creating my own sounds and stuff like that. And I was lucky enough to have some friends that also played instruments, and everybody was just excited about playing together. And it wasn't really about even doing a band. It was just about kind of getting together in your basement and just doing stuff and putting a song together, and that was rewarding enough, you know. But as we sort of immersed ourselves into the local scene in Chicago and all the underground shows that were happening at the VFW halls and in basements and garages and bowling alleys and wherever they would happen all over Chicago, I learned so much from the bands that we would go see. It was an era of my life that really shaped who I am today. The punk scene in Chicago and the hardcore scene in Chicago was about more than just simply entertainment. You know, these were bands that cared deeply about a variety of different issues, who would play shows but would also bring literature on whatever cause they were supporting, whether it was literature about sweatshops or the environment or animal rights or just things that, you know, for a teenager living in a fairly sheltered suburb of Chicago, you know, this was very mind-blowing stuff. And this was stuff that my teachers weren't talking about in school. And so in a sense, it was the punk scene in Chicago was kind of my alternative education, you know. And I felt like I owed so much to the singers of those bands and to those bands in general. And I learned so much from these guys, that guys and girls, that I knew that if I had ever had the opportunity to be on a stage, you know, and have that microphone in my hand, I would want to pass that torch, you know, down to the next generation of kids the same way that those bands sort of passed it to me.
What kind of things do you like talking to these kids about? Do you like, you know, what kind of things, what's important to you?
I think that a lot of anything that we don't feel is being portrayed in or being at least represented in the media enough. You know what I mean? Whether that's, you know, to this day for us, it's environmental issues, it's certainly political issues, anything from America's foreign policy to, you know, nowadays healthcare, you know, things like that, where we feel like our band and punk rock has always been a voice for the voiceless. You know, we've always kind of rooted for the underdog. I think that's why a lot of us ended up in punk rock and hardcore. So those are things that are close to our hearts. Nobody in this band eats meat, and so, you know, that kind of issue is something that's close to us as a band as well.
How do you feel about your relationship with your fans? You know, how do you feel about, you know, particularly your Philly fans here in Philadelphia? What's your relationship like with your fans?
It's an incredibly tight-knit community, you know what I mean? Like, you realize that the majority of our fans, with obvious exceptions, are here for more than just simply to be entertained. They're here because they've identified with the music. You know, there are millions of other bands they could be listening to or going to see play, and something has brought them to us. And in a lot of ways, it's the message behind our band that connects our audience together. And when you have something as big and powerful as that, it sort of makes the show into something so much more special than simply, you know, a consumer-customer relationship. You know what I mean? It's not like, you know, we go out there and it's all about, okay, give us your money and we'll entertain you for a couple hours. You know, it's something way more special, and certainly in the feedback that we've got from our fans, you know, whether it's, you know, a kid that waits out by the bus, like some kid did last night in Baltimore, and, you know, waited 2 hours for me to come out and talk to me and told me how the songs got him through a severe bout with depression, you know, and this kind of thing. And you realize, like, you know, this person is here to do more than just purchase a t-shirt. You know, it's something that's way bigger than that. And that's always been the goal of our band, you know, is to be that band for somebody in the same way that our favorite bands were were for us, you know, and the shows have gotten so much bigger than we ever imagined, and so it's a tough road to navigate as a band who grew up, you know, we grew up playing VFW halls and basements, and so this is sort of foreign territory for us, you know what I mean? And so while we're extremely grateful for it, you know, it's been awesome. You know, of course, it's awesome to have as many fans as we have. We strive to maintain that intimacy, you know, and I can't say we always succeed in maintaining intimacy, but we certainly try to.
I had two more quick questions. I was just talking to one of those fans outside. Said you guys are his favorite band. He said he's got 2 kids, and he said he loves your positive message. How important is it for you to have a positive message? And yeah, and you already touched on that a little bit, but yeah, what would you like to say to those fans?
I think that there's a lot in this scene that sort of, a lot of music that sort of deals strictly with negativity, you know what I mean? And I think that it's important to sort of acknowledge that negativity and embrace the hardships in your life. And certainly we have a fan base of young kids who are going through their adolescence. It's such a tumultuous time in your life. But for us, it's about embracing that, acknowledging it, but then moving on and surviving that and letting those times in your life define you as a person, and realize that those times in your life are there to define you as a person. And in that sense, even the hardest time that you can go through in your life end up with a positive outcome. You know, I think putting that hope in our songs is so important, because I don't want people to walk away from this show depressed. I don't want them to walk away from our record depressed. You know, there's a lot in this world to be depressed about, but what makes it something so special is that we care about it, and we want to let you know that we care about it. And in doing that, we've found so many fans that also care about it, and that in and of itself is so hopeful. You know what I mean? How can you not be an optimist standing on this stage tonight in front of 5,000 people in Philadelphia who care about the world they live in and care about the direction that it's going in? Like, that's something that is overwhelming, and to me that's completely just a positive thing. You know, it's like I'm real lucky to do what I do, because, you know, with such a tumultuous climate that we live in this day and age, whether you want to talk about the economy or the war or the environment, all the things. Sorry about that. I'm real lucky to do what I do, because I get to look out at an amazing audience who, you know, cares about the direction of the world, and that's something that's constantly just this sort of renewing force. It's just a very rewarding experience, and it lets me know that I'm not alone. And for the kids to be there at this show, this family of people that will be here tonight, you know what I mean? They let each other know that they're not alone.
That's great. I forgot to ask you, where did you get the name from, Rise Against? I can see where. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny. It's like, it seems obvious now, you know, the name Rise Against, but when we were a band, we were like any other band. We had no idea what we were doing, you know what I mean? We had no idea what kind of band we even were, what direction it would go in. There was no game plan. You know, we didn't map it out and say, this is what we're going to do with our career, you know? It was sort of like, let's just get in the basement and start playing music, and, you know, I'll start writing lyrics, and whatever comes out of us, whatever is honest and real, whatever we want, you know, when I put pen to paper, I'm just putting down, you know, the way I'm feeling right then. You know, there was no agenda behind it. And we picked the name Rise Against, but it was kind of a happy accident, because we sort of grew into the name in a way. You know, it was, we had no idea what kind of band we were going to be, you know, and we didn't set out to be a political band or a pop band or anything. It just kind of, it was the songs and the fans that really helped define the band in a way. You know, we were putting these songs together, and there were certain songs that people were really identifying with, you know, that more than others, I guess. And we realized through meeting our fans and meeting this giant faction of people that we weren't alone in these thoughts. And in the sense, it was the fans and the shows and the touring that we did that's where our band was born, I guess. And so in a lot of ways we grew into the name, you know. We were sort of, you know, we were the awkward teenager trying to, like, figure everything out, you know. And certainly our audience helped us do that.
And I think something to close out your piece. I'm going to ask you, what's next for Rise Against?
What's next for Rise Against? Well, July of 2009, and we are finishing our tour with Rancid right now, which has been an amazing summer. It's been such an epic tour, and to be on tour with legends like Rancid is something like that for us is such an honor. It's been a privilege to share the stage with them every night. From this, we go to Lollapalooza in Chicago next week, and then we'll go straight to Europe for the festival season in August. So we'll do about 3 weeks in Europe, just playing all over the place. Take a little bit of time off in September, go back to Europe, at this time for club shows. Like we'll headline, we'll be out with the band Thursday and the band Poison the Well. And from then on, we'll probably do a handful of shows in the winter, and then hopefully, wrap this record up and start thinking about a new one.